I'm just gonna. Chris, can you hear me? Chris. Hello. Oh, there it is. Sounds on. See, look at that. Chris is in the background there. Christian is. He makes all the magic happen. Chris, can you take down the splash screen, please? There you go. Look at that. So this is really exciting. Look at how many people we have here now. Oh man, I'm not important to this conversation. People have been seeing me literally for 15 hours now. They don't need to see me anymore. But we're here with a team. Is everybody from University of Montana or no? No. Okay, so in EAB, we're going to talk about digital or equity. Is it just digital equity or just equity for Native American students?
I mean, equity in student success outcomes.
Okay, and equity in student success outcomes. Yeah. I'm ready for this fascinating conversation. This is super cool. Let's introduce each other real quick. Again, they know who I am. You're Pavani Reddy.
Yes, I'm Pavani Reddy. I'm one of the people from EAB and leading up this project called the Data for Student Equity Project. And it was funded in part by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we did a lot of work together as a unified team with the University of Montana.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk, what does EAB stand for? Or is that just the acronym that, the initialism that the company is known by?
It used to stand for the Education Advisory Board. Now it doesn't really stand for anything.
I was just gonna say, did I just put I just look really stupid?
No.
Okay.
No, you just allowed us all to laugh at some point.
Okay.
Feels like an in-joke, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm Emily White. I work at EAB and I lead up our product management and user experience on our data and analytics products, including Edify, which is how we powered our Data for Student Equity initiative.
Right on. Dawn?
Dawn Russell. I am currently at EAB, but I used to be at the University of Montana. So this project kind of migrated me, implemented Edify on the University of Montana campus and worked with this team on this super exciting data equity project.
Super cool. You are?
Hope Ashworth. I'm from University of Montana. So I worked for Dawn for 10 years and when she started this project. And then when she left for EAB, I took her spot. So I've been able to sort of follow up with the implementation of this exciting project. And now I'm here and I get to watch people talk about it.
Awesome. And last but not least,
I'm Matthew Dreitline. I'm the student success analytics consultant. I had the pleasure of working with all these wonderful humans on what a cool project. Designed some cool things, made some impact on some students' lives. It was a lot of fun.
This coterie?
Yes, this coterie. Yes.
So take me to your presentation. What did you put on the table? And then what I'd love to get is what were some of the reactions to it and what, either pushback, challenges, successes. Oh my gosh, why aren't we doing this? That's kind of the thing.
Yeah, so we had the opportunity to share with the good people of Educause, all the attendees, the way that this project came about, and then some of the important design principles that we had in designing a solution that would help Native American students. So we were able
focused on creating analytics. You might connect a lot of sources, or just do SIS at first. So it really depends on what your implementation looks like.
All right. It sounds like that. I mean, from university to university, whatever. Not only what pipes do you already have in place, but how many silos are there? How complex do we want to get? Those kind of those simple. A simple warehousing question, if there is one, right? Because that's the concept of warehousing, right? It's like, how do we bring things together that way, right? In an organized fashion.
Yeah, and what was really cool in this project to showcase was the 9 students that we were able to help get full tuition waivers through the University of Montana through the implementation of this process, because the data about those students coming into the college was in one system, Slate, and their financial aid status of being able, whether they had applied for this tuition, which is fully funded by the state of Montana, just underutilized, that was in the SIS. And so these different departments could see different pieces of things, but when we were able to put it all in one place and say, here are the 200 students that haven't applied yet, the VP of Student Success, Brian Reed, immediately was like, well, I'm going to send emails to these people right now and maybe every day until they all apply for it. And sure enough, 9 students that weren't aware of it because it was sort of lost in the milieu of the many things that come with unpacking a financial aid package, applied and received this tuition waiver. So some real cool student outcomes underneath all of the really important things like data governance and analytics that I am very passionate about too. But like it's important to showcase that some students got helped here, which was really cool.
So I don't know, again, not knowing whose role is what. I mean, this is a very layman's question, but 2023 is in 2 months.
Gosh.
I suppose.
Why is siloed data still a thing at a university? I mean, I understand that some people have, walled gardens that they want to keep. There's politics, but like, how big a problem is this? Is this, across the entire globe? Is this an American problem? And why? Like, what the heck?
Well, I think institutions are choosing a lot of different platforms, which they should. So there's a lot of evolutions across a lot of different vendors who are creating solutions and innovating. And so as they bring more and more technologies onto their campuses, sometimes there's the risk that these technologies don't talk to each other. And so I think it's the case pretty much for every institution that they'll have grown some things inside their campus, they'll have acquired some other technologies, and making all of that work together is actually a really complicated.
So we blame the kludge, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and it's just like the sort of the runway, the time, right? Because you're gonna get your SIS, you're gonna operate your institution, then you're gonna get another platform that that optimizes your housing information, and then you're gonna make a change here, and something else happens there, and then you're starting to get systems that are siloed from one another. So this is a really common problem.
Well, I mean, I was just going to add, look at the number of opportunities here at Educause
100%
for people.
No, I already got it, but thank you very much for that. For some reason, these microphones turn off. I don't know why.
That's very strange. Sorry, go ahead.
So there's so many opportunities for these institutions to get stuff, and they're pedaling so fast to solve their issues that they're working on, that there isn't a lot of, we talk a lot about data governance, but there's also IT governance, and talking about ways that we holistically implement these things to remove those silos. We didn't have that in place, and so now we got to put data governance and IT governance in place to ensure that we're making a seamless, non-siloed thing.
Maybe you're about to touch this, but I want to plug my own self. A guy named Noah Guile is going to be the last person I interviewed.
Yeah.
One of the things he said in kind of his brief, he's like, how can we talk to the IT universe to bring them into the conversation first? He says, because what happens a lot is that they said, dig a hole over here. Yeah. I love it. He said this, right? And then what happens is like, well, actually, that didn't work. And so we need to fill that back in and actually dig this hole over here. So I'd love to hear your perspective on.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those points that we've just talked about are really important in terms of how technologies can talk better to each other. But I think it's also important to remember that, like, the offices, when they were initially created across higher education, weren't designed to talk to each other. There's a person culture, there's a history here of like, we also sort of talk about siloed data in higher education without sometimes bringing into the conversation that we're asking higher education institutions to do a lot of things, right? They have to be a full hotel agency, right? They're housing people. They also have to deliver higher education, which is the thing that they do. They also have to go through this entire admissions process. Each of these are distinctively different businesses. If you were looking at this as like a merger and acquisition, you'd say, well, I don't need these people to talk to each other because there's no way that there's only one revenue stream for all three of them, right? Except there is in higher education. And so that is a very unique problem to the industry, is that we've grown up these institutions with all these different sort of competitive advantages. And then we've sort of said, why aren't you guys talking to each other? And it's like, well, why would they have ever talked to each other? Like and cross-training is something that is so critical with all of these technologies. But so much of it, when you go to an IR department and ask, how do I learn about what that data does? The IR department has to call up that department and say, I don't know how they create that data. That's specific to one particular part of the process that they only do once a year, but is really important for whatever reason. And so there's business process redesign that has to happen alongside the technological innovation. I think that's what you're getting at, the sort of holistic approach.
Right.
And that's just really expensive and hard to do. And people are already, we've talked a lot at this conference, I've heard a lot of people talking about like not enough people to do the current work. And, you know, the scope of what I just laid out is so much bigger than just keeping the lights on and making sure people are registered for classes. So I think that's an important historical context to bring into that, you know?
I think that the IT universe is now, you know, falling on its own sword because it's been magic for so long.
Yeah.
That everybody expects magic, right?
That's a
And
fair
so
point.
why, you know, so now it's almost like, wait a second, I actually don't do magic. It's just you didn't want to understand what we did. And interesting. Go ahead.
Oh, just one thought, which is a tiny magical plug for Edify, is the idea of being able to put things together in a vendor agnostic way. So that's really the idea. So we know that this problem isn't going to be solved overnight, and maybe it shouldn't be, in the sense that there's different technologies that are constantly evolving, different processes and so forth. But the idea of putting things together in a vendor agnostic system that allows you to really organize and store the data, be able to have a single source of truth, and then be able to deploy and work with all these different technologies is really, I think, the magic of that, of solving this problem.
Super cool. So let's take a few months, go back to the Native American students that were actually helped in this particular program. What were some of the challenges? Like, what was the, you know, is it just, as you said, making sure they get the email and they open it? Was it belief in the system that this is actually going to be a real thing? I've heard that quite a few times in conversations with, oh, you're going to give me a device? You know, like, what were some of the challenges you experienced in the program?
Emily, you have some really good examples of like the way the tribal funding comes in at a different time.
Yeah, so we did a complex design process at the beginning of this, where we did focus groups with students. We worked extensively with different stakeholders across the University of Montana to really learn about the different barriers that Native American students were facing. And, you know, Matthew's already talked about students who don't know they're eligible for the Native American tuition waiver, which students are eligible for if they can trace at least 25% Native American ancestry, but they may not know they can add together ancestry from multiple family members, their full parent side, etc.
Is that only if they're like a Montana resident? Or does it go out?
Yes.
Is that nationwide?
Yes.
I was just saying, because I know a lot of Native American people. Like, there's here in Colorado, there's the Cherokee Nation are huge here.
Yeah, this particular waiver is supported by the state, so it is in states.
Okay, cool.
There are some other similar programs around the country. But one issue that we observed that was a great example of, you know, systems not talking to each other, or people just not having all of the information in one place in front of them, was for students who have applied for tribal funding. So the different tribes, there are over 570 federally recognized tribes, and many more that are not. Tribes they're each sovereign nation, so they award funding to students on their own schedules. It's not necessarily by a school's deadline. So a student might apply for funding, know they'll receive it, but get dropped from their classes because they don't have it by the school's deadline.
Of course.
So having that information in one place where you can see, oh, they've applied for it, they haven't received it, they're registered for classes, I need to maybe take some action or consider policy actions of the institution as well around due dates. Those are some of the things that we were able to uncover for challenges that were specific to Native American students at University of Montana that we can address with data.
How big is the University of Montana in terms of a campus? Like, how many warm bodies does it have?
It's around 10,000 students.
Okay. So is that considered small, medium, large? I mean, I went to Colorado State. There's about 60,000. So I don't know.
Well, it's all in context. In Montana, it's pretty
huge.
large.
Yes, but not on the whole.
Well said.
On the whole, I think in general, yeah.
I mean, if I was talking to 10,000 people right now, that's a pretty big ring.
University of Montana is a flagship institution in the state of Montana.
And it's R1, right?
We just became R1 institution, so it is one of the biggest ones in the state of Montana.
Yeah. So we were talking about challenges there. I don't know if the mic got past you because you have another challenge you want to put on the
Yeah, we did a number of focus groups where we heard about challenges for financial aid, but also for mentorship and also for belonging, and not just belonging in certain physical spaces, but also what belonging means in terms of all of our virtual communications. And I say that mostly because we don't have an easy answer for it. That's the sort of a culture change that I think is necessary at the University of Montana and also at a lot of other institutions. University of Montana already has a rich history of prioritizing and trying to do well by Native American students and Native students all across the state of Montana. But even there's still room to push. And I think that that's something that came through as something that we want to continue to take back and iterate on, of how we can enable better communication tools and templates and things that people are able to sort of take and build on. I mean, we spent thousands of hours on this project looking at different ways that we can empower staff with information. And I think that there's still work to be done. The mentorship piece, though, related to our second design, which we're going to be implementing in the spring, which is around providing employment information basically to students, to say this is where students that are like you, maybe from the same tribe, maybe from the same reservation, in the last 5 years, this is where they've gotten jobs based on their majors and their locations, and this is what they've gotten paid, and that information is available at the university, but there's been some resistance culturally to sort of let that information out. And so we designed...
culture from the institution, like the institutional culture?
Yeah, because there's a desire, I think, at a lot of academic institutions to only release data when we can tell you it's statistically significant, or only sort of like provide information when we are holding it to an extraordinarily high level of academic rigor. And so we took an approach where we wanted to give all the practitioners the information, but also give them the sort of qualifier of, when you zoom down into just that tribe or just that reservation in the last 5 years, maybe there's only one person who's filled out the survey. Right. Yeah, sure. And that's a pretty important piece that you should give along with the information. Or, we leave it up to your discretion to say, I'm gonna broaden this filter before I start talking about what outcomes look like for your particular major or for that particular location. And so that, I think, is going to be able to provide a lot. We hope it will be able to provide a lot of hope and inspiration. Definitely not prescription. We're not telling people what they should be doing, but especially because that we also want to tie that into high impact practices, things like internships, volunteerism, faculty-led study abroad, ways that students can get out into the world and use their skills and know if this is really the path I want to be on. And so we're hopeful in the spring that dashboard will give a lot of that inspiration to students as well, and address that other piece that we heard from them in the focus groups.
Super cool. What about other successes that have come out of it, or like from your session that, I think, other institutions raising their hand and saying, how do we do this? Are there other populations that this would, the same kind of program would be beneficial for, or affect, or those kind of things?
I think one sort of unstated benefit that's come out of this project is really a kind of a data cleanup and a data organization effort that I think there's
those are very challenging words right there.
very challenging to do, right? And I think that, and Hope, I'd love to get your thoughts on this too, but I think there are so many things that have now been kind of made clear and uncovered in a way that we are not yet sure exactly how to operationalize kind of the response to those.
Like, what's a specific example? Like, what's one thing that's been like, we discovered this and this needs to be done, but I'm not sure how to do it.
Well, we just discovered a lot of pieces. Have to make this data point mean one thing. We're all going to change our business practices so that it can mean one thing to everybody, so that we all know how to use it. That's, I think, the biggest thing.
Yeah.
What kind of data point? I don't know if I'm going too far down the rabbit hole, but what kind of data point would that be? Like, can you give me an example?
one example that I think that we noticed was there's kind of two ways to define first generation students.
Yep.
And so one comes from what they put in their financial aid, their FAFSA application, and then another is maybe a self-reported indicator that they can answer in the admissions process. And so, different processes might be built on using one or the other data point, and maybe people at the institution are not clear which one is which one is being used. And so even just having visibility, which one are we talking about, and is that the correct one to be talking about, as an example.
And I would just add to that like that visibility is so important, because if, for instance, the self-reporting data point, if that form on the admission side changes, and so suddenly that number drops, there might be people that are relying on that data way downstream that suddenly see the number drop, and then they say, "Wow, we've lost a lot of students that were first generation, but suddenly it's changed, and everyone on the admission side is, no, it hasn't. We're talking about we've been looking at this other data point that's a different level of accuracy." And so keeping everyone on the same page, not about just getting, but keeping everyone on the same page, is super critical. The other thing that I would add to that sort of like uncovering data, we got to a point. So we spent 6 months designing dashboards, right? It was a pie in the sky. We're gonna look at some things in Excel. We're gonna move stuff around. What if this was here? What if this was here? Would you like it? Then we got to the point of like, okay, we actually have to build this now. And we had to look at, well, what are the existing reports that are out there to make sure that when we pipe the data in appropriately, it's accurate. Let's just see what that looks like. And it turned out that 65% of the data points that we had designed and that practitioners had told us were very important didn't have another source of information somewhere on campus. It was information that was locked away in SQL or underneath in the Oracle databases, underneath the technologies that people that had programming skills could go access, which is why across campus there are those people that in that office that can get you that number.
This is not the first conversation I've had where that magic language of SQL.
Yeah,
again,
suddenly
it's such a differentiator in so many of these applications, because that's a foreign language.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in this business for 25 years. I still can't write SQL.
Sure.
I mean,
Sure. And so when we saw that, it was a huge aha moment of like, wow, this is what practitioners are telling us when they're saying we don't have the data, and this is what they're telling us. They're telling all of these pieces that we might have, somewhere in the back end, but is not easily accessible to them.
Data.
Exactly. So
Chris, put that hashtag up. Free the data.
Trending matters after.
You heard it here first.
And I wanted to hit your second question, which is so the audience that we talked to, they had a half dozen or more questions, but we actually asked them a question, because one of the ways that we built these prototypes and then the actual tool is to bring in all of the data in addition to the Native American student data, and especially being focused on the Native American student data. But it's possible to change filters and look at all of the different subpopulations inside of the institution and see how what barriers are coming up for them, and see how to operationalize that data as well. So the question that we posed to the audience is, as they thought about and kind of appreciated what we had attempted here, what priority populations would they be thinking about for their campuses? And so it was a lot of very interesting responses. Certainly, other groups, so first generation came up, and then certainly other kind of racial and ethnic groups. So there was a Hispanic serving institution that's very interested in, but
Whatever was my
more the fortunate
institution.
Sure, absolutely.
Exactly. And then students with disabilities, that's another example of where we have to be really, sensitive about the data and the privacy issues involved, and really organize that data so that it can be a single source of truth. So, there was a lot of interesting comments from the audience about how this could be applied and adapted. And I think you made a really good point at the end about how, not building from scratch is sort of the way to go on this. I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on that.
Sure.
Yeah, what does that mean, not building from scratch? That's interesting.
Yeah, well, as Matthew mentioned, we spent thousands of hours on this project, and we realized that that's not available to everyone, and not everyone has the good fortune to be partially funded with a grant. And, why rebuild the wheel? So we, as Reinvent the Wheel, we have a lot of templates and a playbook available on our project website. We have lots of different offerings to help institutions, kind of take this from the point that they're at and move forward whatever initiative is important to them. So, we offer, like I said, a playbook where you can follow those steps for your priority population. We can help people implement, tweaked versions of the templates that we already have for their priority populations. And then we have other initiatives at our organization where we can offer really kind of wraparound support as well.
So what's the URL for that?
Our project site has a slightly complicated URL.
But we do have a
We're
QR
listening.
code.
Crystal
Yeah.
put it up there. Oh, yeah.
Yes, we have a QR code that we can pop in to your notes.
eab.com/what?
Would that it were so simple.
Would that it were so simple, yeah.
Just so you know, everyone, Matt is actually looking it up right now. That's how simple it is.
Pressure, Matt.
Anyway, we know that there's a
Oh.
resource out there.
There's a great resource.
It's so strange how these conversations, the 30 minutes goes by so fast. It's crazy, right? Tell me about, you gave a bit of foreshadowing, Matt, about what spring semester looks like. Can anyone else take me maybe a little bit further out, 12 months, 24 months, about what does this look like in terms of what would you like to accomplish? Smoother sailing, other silos to break down.
Interventions too.
Yeah. So the grant funding brought us through essentially, this November, this December, and so now University of Montana is looking to operationalize the financial barriers identifier, the one we implemented in the fall, and we're looking to do the employment pathway generator in the spring. We are planning on doing 15 different interventions. The 9 students that I talked about with the tuition waivers, that came from one outreach.
Right.
It was one outreach. So we're doing 15 more across this particular semester to try to work with students that are low income and may need some self-service financial aid information, to work with students with course registration deadlines, with holds on their accounts, all kinds of different things that is all available right in the dashboard. So that's where we're sort of headed right now, is working with campus partners and campus leaders to operationalize all of this information that we've created. Each dashboard has over 100 variables, and some of those are filters that allow you to use the same variable in a different way. So there's really a lot of potential in each of these dashboards. We do have 2 other dashboards that we didn't think were going to have as big of an impact, but we're still interested in: the student success lifecycle funnel, and the student-facing income to debt ratio calculator. So those, I think, also have a lot of interesting impact. We'll see what we're able to develop here in the next 12 to 24 months and what comes of those. But yeah.
I can't thank you all enough, even those of you who did not expect to be on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you for having us.
Great initiative, absolutely fantastic. I'm glad that you got some great feedback during your presentation, and I hope to learn more about it, again in the spring, and then from there. So thank you so much.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
love it. Learned so much. All right, we're back here at Educause. Chris, can you hear us? Just want to make sure that you can hear us. I'm going to take this down so that you can see us. It is. You're podcasting to the universe. Really, literally anybody in the universe can watch this right now on YouTube, which is great. Awesome. I love it. So there you go. I am here with Scott. Wait, Ovchardik. Ovchardik. Scott Ovchardik. Excellent. And Kelly Hoyland. But we're going to talk about micro-credentialing here. You were actually a part of the same panel that Kim was a part of earlier in the day. I spoke with her. But one of the cool things about the panel was that this was actually teed up as different perspectives to micro-credentialing. So I'm really actually quite interested to hear what these different perspectives are. Because Kim, let's just say she has her stuff together. I mean, this is a woman she was a trained, and she's like, I've got, I know what to do, and here's what I'm doing. Scott, let me start with you. First, why don't you introduce yourself, where you come from, and what aspect do you take part in this micro-credentialing universe?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm Scott Ovchardik, University Registrar and Associate Vice Provost for Enrollment Management at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We've been involved in two ways of micro-credentials. First, from a badging perspective, we had many badges across the campus. And we were looking at starting to offer badges that mixed with the credit world. And so our institutional leadership, in partnership with various individuals across the campus, got together and formulated a policy that created some guardrails around our badging and how we do badges at UW-Madison. One of the things that is part of that badging policy, and I won't go into everything right now, but I can go into it a little bit later, is using the One Ed Tech open badges standards,
Okay, cool.
Which is fantastic. So that's one exciting piece. And then the other one exciting piece with micro-credentials is involved with our micro masters, which leads to a master's degree, potentially, if the student is admitted. And so that's been a unique experience as we think about record keeping and credentials and requirements and prior learning assessment and the repository that we keep those records in and how we build that into our infrastructure.
I definitely want to, after you get introduced, I've never even heard of a micromasters before.
They're cutting
That
edge.
shows you how to touch an eye. That is really cutting edge. Wow. So please, but first, Ellen. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Kelly Hoyland. I'm with One Ed Tech. We used to be known as IMS Global Learning Consortium, so you might know us from that. So data technology, interoperability standards is the heart of what our organization does. But I support our higher ed members, really looking at how are they using these standards to meet learner needs, meet institutional goals. So helping to support them, I run a community practice and some webinars, work with people like Scott and others and Kim who are doing these programs to help answer strategy questions and kind of really define their plans for what they can do.
Since you have the mic in your hand, I'll ask you the first question. What's the biggest strategy issue? Like when organizations or institutions come to you, what's like the number 1, 2, 3 stumbling blocks they're having, or is it just we're deer in headlights, or
all of the above?
Okay,
no,
yeah,
I think
sure.
part of it is the scope because you can do so much with micro-credentials. So our panel this morning had very different perspectives and reasons for doing their micro-credentials. Some are doing it to address enrollment issues. Some are doing it to kind of give an opportunity to showcase learning that happens outside of a classroom or non-credit. So there's a whole gamut that you can use them for. So the first thing they have to figure out is why do they want to do it?
Right.
And then to get the right people around the table. Because this is more about culture and change management than actually the technology pieces.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So now take us over to your experience. You said that there was already, a number of badges that happened, and now it sounds like you were the wrangler, right? You were basically the rodeo specialist, or maybe you now have that title.
We were a gaggle of wranglers.
I love it. Well, it's kind of interesting because Kim said earlier, she said they kind of jumped in 2 feet like 6 or 7 years ago, and they had like 98 badges. And she was just like, "This is ridiculous." We have a badge for, I think it was jazz improv. And she's like, "We need a badge for you." She's like, "No, we don't." So what was your experience?
It's great. We had, when we started to dig into this with our partners, and I want to give full credit, Division of Continuing Studies did some amazing work helping coordinate some of this, but we had 35 badges across campus, and we were awarding it to about 3,500 learners. And it was amazing the breadth and depth of the different badges that were being developed and being used. One of the most unique, I think, was an ammonia refrigeration certification of sorts. And this faculty member is world renowned, right? And it's amazing. And the individual was able to have competencies that were built in. Learners would master those competencies, and assessment was done. And then once they received that badge, that was good in the industry, and industry looked for that badge for that type of certification. So it's a great, unique opportunity where a faculty member has that skill set. We're developing that in our learners, and then they're going and getting compensation increases or getting jobs.
Sure, yeah.
And so real life examples and real need from the industry.
Super cool.
Yeah.
So when you say, Haley, that the first is the why, what's the why at University of Wisconsin? So, was it to do workforce enablement, or make that connection to the workforce? Was it to provide other opportunities? Was it to bring more people into the university? All of
Yeah, I think it's been kind of it's a little bit of the wild, wild west strategy. And so I think that's been different in different aspects. I spoke about the ammonia one, which was definitely workforce driven, skills-based, very skills-based, tight connection. We have other badges that have been more for internal use. Our Center of Teaching Learning Management, helping instructors and faculty develop skills for teaching online. That once they go through those experiences, they can get the badge there. So it's really been a kind of a multifaceted approach and strategy for those. And we're a big decentralized R1 institution where things happen that we don't even know are happening.
Sure, yeah, of course. Yeah.
And so I think that's been kind of one of the challenges for a place like UW-Madison is how do we think about the guardrails necessary? How do we develop that policy, which we've worked through, and how do we support and enable that creativity and innovation at our faculty and department levels?
Fantastic. If you play an advisory role, do you also play a development role as well? Do you do development, or is it mostly we support? Okay.
We support. So we're not really on the development side. Some of our members are the EdTech community, so they're supplier members who are developing the products, that you can issue your badges through. You can issue some of that. So we do support.
So for those of us who don't know, what are some of those products? Let's give a little plug for anyone.
So different products could be like Credly, Badger, now known as Canvas Credentials, Acclaim, any of those kind of traditional badge platforms. I think right now there's 30-ish of them that are currently certified to the Open Badge standard. So a number of options that you can use, lots of choice, lots of options. But really what we're looking at is figuring out why are you doing it? How can we do it? How can we make sure that when you do it, that those badges aren't locked within your institution? Because the whole point of these micro-credentials is empowering the earners to share them, whether it's for admission into a master's program, through a micro-master's, or to employment, to upskill, and things like that. So really making sure that our systems aren't creating barriers.
So that actually was something that Kim brought up earlier as a point of pride, is that when they get badges, they're actually tied to their official transcript at the University of Kansas, right?
Yep.
Wichita State. Apologize. Is that an example of barrier? Or because it sounds to me like as long as the student can use the badge, it's a good thing, or what do I have?
Yeah, I think both are good options. So Kim comes from a continuing ed area where, somebody will be like, I did this class and I got this, paper certificate 20 years ago. Can I get another copy?
Right.
It doesn't exist anymore. At least as a digital badge, that's going to exist and persist. Having it on the transcript gives it a level of credibility. Some institutions are choosing not to go that route and keeping them kind of separate, as Scott is. Others are choosing to kind of make them a little bit more blended. And it kind of depends on the institutional priority and where they want them to live, as long as you have a system for your learners to be able to have them and have record of them.
So what tell us about the choice that your university
makes? Yeah, so our transcript is governed by our University Academic Planning Council, so big G governance.
Okay.
I like we refer to it. Faculty governance controls everything. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think that's part of one of the reasons we didn't think about putting it on the transcript. And also, I think just from I don't know if it's philosophical, but just from a philosophical perspective, a digital badge is not something that goes on a transcript, which is a scorecard of sorts, and it's archaic, and it's used as very important purposes. But digital badge is really something that people are going to use in social networks. They're going to post to their LinkedIn site. It's going to have the metadata buried into it. That's the real power. So if you were to see a badge, you can understand what the learning outcomes were part of that badge, when it was issued, when it expires, what was the assessment like. And so through the leadership of
on ed tech. We have the Open Badges 3.0 standard now that really helps us make sure that all of those components and metadata exist so that then students can portable and they don't need a transfer. So it really puts the digital credential in the learner's hand.
Okay. Good.
One more thing. We are considering, though, interesting enough, from a campus records perspective, we may add the badge as an entity in the student information system. So our teams or advisors could say, "Oh, Stephen, you've got computer science, a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, and you have this badge. It's Python coded." And so that way we would be able to show that kind of comprehensive learner record type thing.
And that's where I was going to
Go for it. You can do
And
it.
I was going to add to that because that's the other part of micro-credentials. If they're not living in a transcript, is there a better way for them to be represented for a record? And a comprehensive learner record or a learning and employment record is kind of a new trend also coming up that is really about the collection of a number of achievements, badges being one of them, micro-credentials. It could also be work experience or competency-based things. That's a new kind of area that's emerging too, that our institutions are looking at that type of record instead of the transcript, which even as I was a hiring manager and I get a transcript, I'd be like, check. It didn't really mean anything to
Well,
me.
I'm just wondering how, the universal record, like, isn't this my LinkedIn profile? Like, I mean, as long as I've really curated it and.
Yeah. And the technology standards, these digital wallets, we all carry digital driver's license or vaccine cards. These badges can also now live in that kind of a technology. So it can be on your phone. You can walk around and say, hey, look, I've got a Python boot camp badge, I don't know why you would need it on your phone every day.
I was just say, I feel like there would be a certain. People would say that you don't need to have
Steven's
that.
hiring a Python program.
Yeah,
There you go, bud. I'm in. Steve's verified.
But the power behind that is the learner now controls them. So the person who earned it doesn't have to go pay a transcript fee and get a copy of the transcript. They now have ownership and are able to kind of curate their records and share them as they want. And maybe they're going to pull those micro-credentials from multiple institutions, and maybe there's some employer training and some community-based training that they can pull all of that together into one record.
And I like that curation, right? The student's in control of curating the records, but what's very important, it's still verifiable.
Yes.
Because of that metadata in there is that the recipient of that credential can see that it's verified, it's accurate, it's authentic, and that's one of the important things I think as we think about micro-credentials and badges as we move forward.
So take me to MicroMasters. Is this a master's that's built around just micro-credentials?
No.
What's a MicroMasters?
So we are embarking on a partnership with edX platform. Yep. And what we're doing is part of our strategy in our Wisconsin School of Business. Dean Samba is a world leader and an awesome rep for our school. We're looking at expanding our reach to more global population and international population, more so than UW-Madison might have.
Right.
I mean, obviously we're an internationally renowned institution, but the ability to have a couple non-credit experiences that could lead to a MicroMasters, a series of maybe 3 courses leads to a MicroMasters, and then that once the student is admitted through our credit by examination or prior learning assessment, the learner could get credit for those non-credit experiences that would apply towards the master's degree.
Oh, wow.
And then they would have to finish the remaining part of the curriculum for the master's degree. What's been unique and interesting is the edX partnership, how we build that, scale that into our institutions, into the infrastructure of our institutions. But it's also been the fun tension, push and pull of how fast industry and edX can move.
Aren't they 2 years? Weren't they?
Yes,
they were acquired
like a year by 2 years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the tension between our faculty governance, which doesn't move as slow. So we have a notice of intent that we will be offering offering a master's degree. It hasn't gone through full faculty governance, and so we have to navigate that process. But it's been interesting from an infrastructure development perspective of how those two kind of worlds collide and kind of build this tension. And it's been kind of fun learning as we've tried to adopt this in support of the strategic initiative for our school of business.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And I find that those yin-yang relationships can actually be really beneficial because you learn from both.
Yeah.
And there's, I think it creates the natural tension that's created. I think it lifts all boats, right? Because they have to slow down a little bit. You need to speed up. You need to be a little more agile. They need to be a little more structured and think beyond just the next cycle, the next report, or whatever. Those kind of things are very interesting. as someone who's got 30 vendors, someone who's got probably hundreds of vendors that you work with, those kinds of things, what are the challenges in your business as one ed tech, you know, as a recommendation engine, as a here's the direction you should go, because you've got a lot of competition there and a lot of voices that are going to want to influence that conversation.
Yeah, I think part of it is it's such a hot topic. It's micro-credentialing, digital credentialing.
I think there's 6 or 7 presentations on
at least
here alone, right?
I was here last week for a different conference talking about the same thing. So I think even within just higher education, as I look at associations and membership organizations, we're all trying to support this work and making sure we're not making it more confusing for institutions. So just before coming up here, I was talking with ACRO, the registrar's organization. UPSI has been involved in continuing it. So making sure that there's some alignment and consistency there so that you're not hearing different messages across institutions and being like, no, we need to do it for this reason. No, we have to do it this way. So you get more synergy. Similar reason, because making sure that the technology is there to support what the institutions want to do, because they're coming up with innovative ways to do things like MicroMasters, things like that, or even some of our community college members who are looking at very workforce related, like there's a skills need in my community, I need to have a solution tomorrow.
Right.
Things like that, making sure that we can support all of that.
So for both of you, what's the biggest challenges you're overcoming over the next 6 to 12 months? What are you looking forward to?
Survive. No, I'm just kidding.
Get me home from
Educause, right? I think actually one challenge I'd like to highlight that I think it's been one we've been facing as registrars as well. We have these massive ERP systems, student information systems. Some like to refer to them as innovation killers, right? Very structured, very complex, very integrated, very connected. And one of the challenges we've had as a team, and I have the most awesome, amazing, talented, wicked smart team, is how do you support the faculty in the department, schools, and colleges with these cool, innovative, and really exciting initiatives for how learning is changing, how we're delivering education in this very structured world.
Right.
How do you allow for the experiment but build it to scale? So we have this MicroMasters I was mentioning into Masters. We have other departments that are watching very closely, and they want to be the next program.
It's just like, okay, you go fail, and
Right.
we'll do it right.
Right,
And
and then it's the wonderful team in the registrar's office and our central IT that have to build this to scale. And so that's really a challenge when you're running an institution and 198 programs, massive department structure, and then trying to acknowledge these really cool, innovative initiatives and support the faculty there is really challenging.
super cool.
For us, we have new versions of the Open Badge and CLR standards coming out in the coming months that really enable that digital learning wallet that I talked about, that flexibility. So we're aligning with the W3C verifiable credentials work. So that standards work is being finalized. So getting through adoption, getting people to understand what value that brings to them as an institution and their learners and all of that. So that's a big challenge for us. Plus continuing to wrangle, making sure that we're working together and people are on the right path and they don't have to make the mistakes that other people have, so we can share those lessons learned.
Thank you so much. I know that you got a hard stop. We kind of came a little before, but I want to thank you both for taking the time out of the conference to come speak with me. And I wish you all the best in the new standards in wrangling. And I look forward to hearing more about what happens in the near future.
Thanks for
Thank you
having
very
us.
much. Thank you.
Chris, can you hear us? Are we back online? You know what? I bet we have to change these settings here because
yes.
I turned Shazam. Now we're online. Now we're working. All right.
Okay.
Audio is on. Welcome back to Educause. Sorry, I almost called it Edutech. That's somewhere else. Educause here in Denver, Colorado. We're in the afternoon here, and I'm here with Jace Tail,
Yes.
which, your presentation is going to be tomorrow.
Correct.
Which, unfortunately, we can't talk to them because they kick us out of the place where we're podcasting, so that's not going to be happening. But you're going to be talking about BIPOC. Darn it.
You better not say it wrong.
But at the end of the day, the panel that you're a part of, that you're going to be talking about is what's it like to be a leader who is not a part of, maybe the racial or the identity majority in these institutions, right?
Correct.
So how do you bring your genuine self there? How do you bring your culture? How do you bring who you are essentially to these places? Why don't you introduce yourself first and tell us who you are, where you come from, what institution you're at, those things.
Right. So my name is Jace Teal. I usually just go by Jace, and I'm actually right now at Cal State University Maritime Academy, because I've been actually in 3 places in the last 6-7 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In the Bay Area. I'm currently the Senior Director of Academic Technology, and I manage the simulations. So Maritime Academy has cadets as students, and they are prepared to be captains, mariners, engineering deck, whatever. And so we have a ship on site. The students go on cruise or training, as you would say, for 2 months every summer. So the ship sails. I'm also in charge of the classroom technology, which really needs an upgrade for teaching and learning. And I'm also in charge of the learning management system. So we're in the process of migrating from Brightspace to Canvas. It's actually a state legislature mandate. So we do have to move to Canvas.
No kidding.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So all the 23 CSUs will be in Canvas by 2023, 2024.
Okay. I just had to ask, how did that happen? Like, how did the state legislature even step into this thing?
I think there's a couple of reasons why, because about 15 campuses were already on Canvas, and it just made sense because from a cost perspective, and all the community colleges are also on Canvas. They've been on Canvas for at least 10 years, if not more. And the transfer students coming to the CSU will naturally have a seamless, hopefully, transition into a learning management system they already know and use.
Sure.
And I think it's a long time coming, but I think it was just being forced upon. And usually it's not the case, but
does the learning technology, I just have to ask, does it exist on the ship as well?
That is a very, very good question.
When they set sail, are they truly like they're out at sea and they're kind of on their own?
That's a very good question, because I step into this role, and one of the things that the faculty says to me is that our previous LMS told us that they promised that Brightspace will work on the ship, and it did not. So I'm investigating with Canvas, and Canvas says there are possibilities, but what we have to do is self-host our own Canvas server. So it's doable, and I was working with somebody who works for the state prison in Washington, Seattle, as well as somebody probably from the Maine Maritime Academy on how this can be done. But this is the next step.
Because then you'd have to synchronize
correct
with your cloud somewhere.
Correct, and it's open source, and there's a different way of running Canvas on the ship when the cadets are on it than when they're on ground, I guess is what you would say. So it's a very interesting challenge, I guess.
That's a heck of a problem to have. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think about how many other LMS or CIOs or LMS admins or whatever out there thinking they have to think about boats as well.
Nope, just in the CSU, just Maritime Academy. But I don't know how the rest are doing it. That's the problem. All of the Maritime Academies are on the East Coast. We're the only one in the West Coast. And that is what I think sets us apart from the rest.
Right.
So it's pretty exciting, but also very daunting.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So take me to this panel that you're going to be on. What are, is this a panel where you're going to tell your personal experiences and challenges and those kinds of things? Or is it already is there a set format? Like, what is going to be on the stage?
Right.
Just kind of introduce the topic.
So I guess I wanted to preface that by saying that there are 12 of us. The next Leaders Fellowship is a sponsored by Bowdoin College primarily, but
Okay.
also partner with Educause and Next Generation recruiters, and along with many others that I can't quite remember at this point. But the main sponsor is Bowdoin College, and it is actually the brainchild of Michael Cato, who is the VP and CIO at Bowdoin College, who wanted to promote more BIPOC leaders into the IT community
Sure.
to help them in their career pathways, to mentor them so that they can succeed in this environment. So 12 of us got selected from all over based on an essay application with numerous questions. And I was one of the persons selected.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
And so this group of people that will be on the panel are part of the Next Leaders Fellowship. And part of what we want to talk about, the challenges as well as the successes. I think more of the challenges of being a leader in a space where we're predominantly not the majority. So some of us are going to bring in some personal stories, and some of us are going to talk more authentically about our experiences that I think are seldom shared in just a normal space, because it can get uncomfortable.
Of course.
So I think this is what came out of it, part of it, being in IT. So I really want to actually kudos and thank Michael Cato from Bowdoin College, as well as a lot of amazing mentors who have been with us in this journey, who are also leaders already in CIO or some capacity in different universities, who's helping us through this journey.
Tell me about that journey. So, I mean, how long have you been on it now? I mean, when did you get the fellowship, and
wow,
what's the journey been like? So what
Yeah.
what does that mean on the journey? Is it you said mentorship? So
Right.
have there been?
So since we're the new inaugural class, Michael's like, we just play by trial and error.
Yeah, of course.
And so we started our first I think we were selected like around January. I mean, time is lapsing too quickly for me, but the first face-to-face meeting we had was in NERCOM in Rhode Island.
Okay.
Please don't tell me to tell you what it means right now, but everybody who's in this academy will know what it's a Northeast Computing Association for the Northeast. And we met for the first time in March. And that was when we got together. We did a couple exercises like strength finder tests, finding your true strengths.
Sure.
And then we talked about designing your life as well, based from two Stanford professors who wrote the book Designing Your Life. It's not just about your life, but it's about work-life balance and discovering yourself and who you are in your career and what you want to be, and how can we help you get there. We also had recruiters come in and talk to us about how the process works, like from when you get the cold call, from how you interview, from how you can be successful, and along the way. So the 12 mentors are assigned to 12 of the mentees, and typically touch base with us, depending whatever suits your schedule, either once a month or every other week, and so forth. So it's grown organically. But what's really have been a really amazing experience is that the 12 of us are minorities.
Sure.
And so we shared a common experiences in life, in our journey, that is hard to explain to some folks who are not part of the circle. So what makes this group really, really special is there's a common bond of shared struggles, I would say, and challenges, and brought us really closer together as a team.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can you share some of the struggles? I don't know. Are you allowed to talk out of the group,
Yeah.
or?
So part of what we are going to share tomorrow is, like I said, how do you bring your true self to your workplace? How do you navigate the challenges being a leader? I think for me, it's I can speak for myself, is you have to know who you are and what your values are and what you will and will not compromise. And at times you do have to compromise, because we work with so many different people at the university, administrators, staff, faculty, and students, that you're trying to achieve a common goal. And sometimes you do have to compromise. And I think one of the things that I've learned to do is to listen. Everybody have their own set of experiences. People say, "Oh, I'm listening to you," but they're not really listening. You're listening to really listen, instead of, before I finish what I'm saying, you already have an answer for me. So really finding my own voice, I think, was the challenge, because I grew up in Southeast Asia, and I'm quicker to think about things and process as opposed to speak up. So in a room full of predominantly usually males, they will start talking among
Cheers,
and
it look
above
like me, you
each
can say it,
other.
it's all good.
They talk above and among each other, and nobody's listening.
Yeah.
Everybody's just talking, in a board meeting. And it's not that I don't have my voice, but everybody's interjecting. So how do I find my voice in those moments without saying, excuse me, hello, I'm here? Or maybe she doesn't have anything to say. So just finding that place, the right moment, and being bold about who I am. So it's easy for people who've never had that situation before, but it's difficult when you didn't grow up like that. You didn't have that privilege where you're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm just gonna speak up. I'm just gonna say whatever I want, and no filter,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
So-
one example.
And so what are some of the outcomes that that are hoped for from the fellowship, from for instance the panel that you're going to do tomorrow? Like obviously awareness raising is the biggest piece of to it, but are there other specific goals that come out of it, or is it really just starting to build this network in this community? And
so I think what collectively we say is, how can we pay it forward? How can we and how can we, my slogan is this: know that you're not alone, that you have a network of people who will support you. You just have to reach out. You have to find them. We're not many, but we're here.
Interesting.
So that's kind of what I want people to know and take away from. Like, don't think that you're alone in your journey, in your struggles, because some of the stories that I've heard from other folks who've gone through the experiences about, how they have to work harder to be where they are, how they have to face discrimination and challenges because of either their accent or the color of their skin. They've had to work triple, double hard to be in the position where they are right now, compared to their counterparts. So a lot of us felt like we have been alone in our journey for a long time. Like we were isolated, we didn't have a network. And what happened is this network brought us all together, and we're stronger because of it together. So tomorrow's message is really about, for me, is know that you're not alone, and know your worth. Sometimes you feel like you think are better than you are, but know your worth and know what you carry forward, and be brave, be confident, be bold.
I love it. I mean, there's nothing. I'm trying to listen. So that's great. What do you get to, or is there any intention to be able to connect you with? Like right now, like we're surrounded by hundreds of vendors, right? And so there's lots of touch points. Are there other individuals that outside sort of the higher ed ecosystem that this could touch, or you could bring into, or bring this message to, or is there any pathway for that?
Well, I would say that because we're 12 unique individuals in this program, everybody is finding their own voice on what they're doing. I can give you examples of folks who works with juvenile prisoners. I won't give names, but you can talk to her if you want to. Someone who really wants to contribute to Latinx community, who wants to make sure that the students are being encouraged and mentored. They want to give back that way. I think for me, what I really want to do is to make sure that people know that there's hope, and also to make sure that when I'm out there in the community, which I'm actually exploring, I'm part of the Chamber of Commerce in my area that I'm in, exploring the possibilities of nonprofit, like the homeless population, which is a problem everywhere, not just here, but everywhere. And also the state legislation, elections, ballots, politics. We don't exist in a bubble. This is higher ed.
Yeah.
But outside of higher ed, there's all these avenues and opportunities to make an impact and to touch lives. So I think for me, it's more like when I see somebody who's really quiet, for example, because I'm an introverted person, and I
don't know. You're very powerful.
No, I can sense, and I would go up to the individual and say, "Hey, do you want to join us?" Or somebody who's out there by themselves. Or if I see a person of color, I would
I would go up and I'll be like, hey, like come join us.
Absolutely.
Be very inclusive and be very intentional
Mhm.
about that. Or a student, a faculty member, a staff, because our campus is not very diverse. And so it's something that we're working towards. Or in leadership positions, there are a lot of non-diverse people. I know people say like there are a lot of Asians around in California, but they're not necessarily Asians that will speak out. And when they speak up, sometimes it's a different kind of boldness. So you kind of have to know the balance between intentionality and wisdom. I feel like you need to know this is a time to say this and this is not. And how do I get everybody on the same page and together collaboratively? So I've only been in Maritime for 4 months. I was in a different campus, CSU Stanislaus before. And so I've been learning the culture, the politics of the place, and just trying to be more intentional about who I hire, how I hire, and bring the talent in, and not just put a recruiting pool in like hireatjobs.com, but reach out to a more diverse community where you know that people are more likely to seek jobs who may not even go to higher ed, who might be a Latino, group, community group. It could be an Asian community group, or, frankly, a Black community group. So things like that. But this group is doing amazing things, and there are amazing people in that group.
Tell me about. So we only have a few more minutes here, but like, take me to what happens next. Like, how long is this fellowship? Do you then have? Do you feel like either you have like a mandate or a responsibility to continue to carry on the message? Like, how will you look back and maybe interact with the second cohort, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. No. This is a pleasure. It's not a mandate. It's not a responsibility. It's a joy. When you do something, when we went through the exercise of designing your life, they ask you a question about what gives you most energy and what saps your energy. And if you sit and write it down, you think about it, I can tell you that this gives me energy because you're just giving back what you're being blessed with. That's how I feel. And people are just pouring into your life without asking you for anything in return. So, and for me, I've been really blessed in that sense. So I think it's time to just do it for other people. Because I would say one of the things that drew me to the program is I have not had really any mentorship. Like I've kind of had to, kind of like try and error, fly by the seat of my pants, just observe like people who were not necessarily really good leaders, in my opinion. And there are very many of them out there, but we need many more good ones than not so good ones. And so I really would like to develop and help mentor people into whatever they want to be. Maybe they don't want to be a leader, they just are happy where they are, but how can you stretch them further than just what they're doing? So, and the group is, I can guarantee you 100% that the group feels the same way.
That is awesome.
There's no doubt about that.
Well, is there any way that anybody who's listening here, other than seeing your presentation tomorrow, like can learn more about this or tap into it or support it or?
Yeah, I wish I remember the exact URL, but I would say if you just Google Next Leaders Fellowship, you will find a lot of information about who we are and what we do. And like I said, we're just in an inaugural group, but I'm sure that we'll open up applicants soon and get the word out there and get more people involved. And together, hopefully, we will make higher ed or the world better or greater, I think.
Super cool. We have to end on that right there. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and talk with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Chris is our audio working again. All right, look at that. He tells us we're all okay. There's these magicians in the background that do all this stuff. You wouldn't mind taking down the splash screen, please? We are here with Victoria Geddes and Jay Gladden. Are you both at the same institution?
No.
No. Okay. Fantastic. Different
I'm at
institutions.
Northwestern University.
So yeah. So why don't you introduce yourself, Victoria?
I'm at Northwestern University. I'm the director of teaching and learning technologies in Northwestern IT.
Okay. Excellent. And Jay?
Associate Vice President for Learning Technologies for Indiana University.
Wow. All right. We got to talk to Phil. He's
That's what I hear. That's what I hear.
So you had a panel, a presentation this morning at 8 a.m. in the snow and sleet. People came. Tell me about, my understanding was that it was going to be how do we create a student-centered support, IT system. But you said it actually turned out to be more about how do we support faculty. Why don't you just kind of walk me through what it is that you put on the table?
Sure. So we had a group of 4 of us from other Big Ten institutions. So Indiana, Michigan State, Northwestern, and Rutgers were the schools represented. So schools that are big, small, urban, less urban, and so forth. And we were really talking about sort of where are we now in terms of the changes that have been wrought by the pandemic. What do we see coming, and are we anywhere near a next normal?
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer would be no.
No,
we don't
really?
think so.
Really?
No,
People don't think so?
Oh, no, not yet.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think the theme is how do we best support students. I think a lot of our work is through faculty. And I think faculty are really struggling with how do we best do that? Because the media have proliferated, the modes of delivery have proliferated. Students have realized that flexibility is a thing, that, hey, I like captioning on my lectures, I like recorded lectures. Mm-hmm. And that's just a lot more to add on to the traditional faculty ways. We talk about that.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've seen at all of our institutions is this uptick in the number of students needing accommodations through their offices of disability services.
Okay.
And, this sounds terrible, but for years, those offices and those students were asking us, can you record all the lectures, please? Can you caption all the lectures, please? And we would basically say, no. We didn't have the funding, we didn't have the personnel, we didn't have the technology. And then the pandemic hit, and we had all of those things.
Suddenly, oops, now we got it. Yeah.
Now we got it. And those students are saying, well, why did it take so long? And is this going to go away? They're really worried about that.
Mm-hmm. So when we think about, you just said that student support happens, did I get it correct, happens through faculty support. Does that sound right? So I almost feel like you've answered this question, but I want to kind of go down the rabbit hole a little further. You said technologies have proliferated, media modes, delivery modes have proliferated. What is if I'm in a Big Ten school, like what does the typical professor profile look like in that regard in terms of, is it just sort of a mimicking of what you would see in any group of humans, that some people are super tech savvy and they're early adopters, some people are never going to adopt it and be like, no, heck no. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head there. I think the difference these days is students are coming to universities having experienced a very standardized K-12 LMS experience, and they hit higher ed and it's totally unstandardized. And so a lot of a first-year student feeling overwhelmed may be them figuring out where does their assignment live, when's something due, because it's not just very transparent for them. And that's one of the things we talked about today.
Why does that chaos exist? I guess we haven't lived in the United States for quite a while, so I don't know what's a typical K-12 like standardized experience look like that you would think.
So my daughter teaches 7th grade English in Virginia.
That sounds pretty standard.
It sounds very standard, and so she uses Canvas. And at the beginning of the school year, she was given her course sites, and they had a standard format and a standard look and feel. And if she wanted to change anything, she had to do it through the tech person. So they kept.
What the standardization was through gatekeeping, essentially.
Exactly.
Okay.
So she can add content, but if she wanted to add like a whole new section of something, it had to sort of go through not an approval process, but something.
A process.
Right? And so that's what
our students are coming from is something that's pretty standardized, and then they get to our institutions and Professor X is doing it this way, Professor Y is doing it that way, and then, if you're in a lab course, you've got a lecture Canvas site or other LMS site, and then you've got one for the lab, and then you've got one for the support group that you're in for people in the sciences,
Right.
And then you've got another one attached to that class for some other group of people. You can have 4 different ways of getting around. It's really hard.
For someone, if you want to add on to that? Or?
No, I think it's just a really interesting phenomenon. That one that I just actually embarrassingly awoken to maybe a year ago. But I think it's a real pain point for our students.
Well, so again, sort of an innocent layman question from someone who doesn't manage it, isn't a CIO at a Big Ten school. Like, how did this wild west happen? In terms of, it would seem to me that bigger university, more resources, someone would freak out and say, we've got to be able to control this somehow. But it seems like almost the opposite happened. Like what's what? I'm for someone who's kind of looking from the outside in, it would just seem like, how could you let this chaos proliferate?
Chaos is built into higher ed. Yeah. We cannot tell faculty what to do.
Interesting.
We have always been told in IT, you can't tell faculty what to do. We can give them tools, we can give them guidelines, we can give them best practices, but we can't tell them what to do. They are
they're the owner of their material and delivery, and they're the expert.
Yes, which is the way it should be. I mean, you don't want your information coming through only one standard pipeline. You wouldn't go to a class on design thinking and expect to have the same delivery and engagement that you would in a class on medieval literature, right?
Really, medieval literature is very famous. Now, this is the 4th time it's been brought up in the last 2 days. I love that one. Anyway.
Okay, well, I don't know why I came up with medieval literature, but you would want a different approach based on the topic and the expertise.
Sure. Okay. So, out of your panel this morning, and I'm assuming you didn't walk out of the room with everybody going, "Oh well, we're all just kind of screwed." That was good. Like, what kind of came of it? What questions were there? Is it? Are we still in the sort of let's form small groups and talk about it and see what bubbles up, or are there concrete solutions to go forward?
I think one of the key themes was just the notion that now more than ever we have to be out engaging with our stakeholders and utilizing all sorts of information that we have at our fingertips. So any sort of institutional research, whatever is talked about nationally, internationally in terms of teaching and learning. But then also really specific and focused conversations with faculty and students about their experiences. From my perspective, one of the things we're spending a lot of time talking about is how do we make things easier for faculty? Because maybe they might not present it that way, but when we present ideas that make things easier or take less time, they're very interested. And it makes sense because they're being asked to do more. So what can we help take off their plate? So that's one of the things from a technology perspective that we're focusing on. How can we use technology to help with that in that way?
Anything else that you want?
Yeah, one of the things that we didn't get a chance to explore this morning, but I sort of wish we had, was that, at least at my institution, my group has never had a better reputation on campus. And so we have this moment coming out of the pandemic shift where I think if we asked for big things, we might be able to get them. Are you seeing the same thing?
I agree with the notion that I think there's a deeper appreciation for the work that we do. For example, we spun up, before the pandemic, we'd spun up a site called Keep Teaching. It was really a disaster preparedness exercise. But it had all the resources, like basic resources one would need to flip a class from in-person to online. It got, it was bad luck that we ended up having to use it so quickly. But I think people realize where those resources are coming from and they value them. And also the technology, having relied on it so heavily. Like there was a rumor floating around our campus that Zoom was going away. So part of what I do when I talk to faculty is just want to spell the rumor. The process is renewing Zoom, just because that is so integral to their workflow and their work and their teaching and learning.
So that's interesting that it's an emergency thing, but then dependency kind of is created, and then we're many of the conversations we've had, or I've had over the last day and a half here, have been around just sort of high flex, about the expectation that it's no longer in person or hybrid. It's now I'm going to kind of choose a la carte what I want to do. How is that affecting, your decision making, your messaging? Hey, I mean, even just speak to how important is messaging. It sounds like you say you've got a moment right now. What are you going to do to flex the muscle? Like, and just say, hey, look, what are the big asks?
Yeah, you said high flex, and I thought, can I leave now?
I agree.
That's awesome.
It's really, really hard. It's really hard to do well. And
Do you have an essence? Because for me, and again, a layman question, it feels natural to me. But that just may be because I'm a tech savvy person who, is comfortable with ambiguity and thinking on the fly, right? What makes it hard, like especially in a large institution like the ones that you run?
so in my mind, high flex means that students can attend in person or remotely, and they can choose that at any time.
Extemporaneous, yeah, like whenever.
So, today I'm going to be remote. Today I'm going to be in person. And so what we're asking the instructor to do is basically design for both of those audiences, not know ahead of time what the balance is going to be, and if they're trying to create some kind of interactive activities for the class, figure out how to bridge that divide between people who are in person and those who are online. So it's not like you're designing a brand new course, it's like you're designing 2.5 new courses.
Particularly the asynchronous component is expected with that as well.
Sure.
I think that eventually I think there'll be boundaries to the flexibility, and one way this may manifest is there'll just be different ways classes are offered, so that you won't have necessarily, you have a fully remote class that's asynchronous if that's what you want, and that fits better in your life and fits your schedule. Or you'll have a in-person class that has the option to have some hybrid elements where necessary, or maybe some hybrid days. The whole high flex comp is particularly based on what Vicki just talked about. I think it's just too complex, and even the most flexible and adaptable instructor is going to struggle with it.
Does this, especially as Big Ten institutions, are you or do you have the privilege of being connected to industry outside of higher ed who are struggling with the remote work problem? And are you hearing the same thing? And is it now an expectation that's bleeding out from graduates into the workforce saying, hey, I did it back there, how come I can't do it here, or vice versa? They're both laughing, by the way. They're both laughing at me.
I haven't heard that specific challenge, but I know.
I just put it on the table. That's me.
I know the. I think we're all trying to figure out what the workspace looks like and the level of presence required. I think that's happening
everywhere.
In all of our workspace. I haven't heard that one. That'll be interesting to see. Is how does the flexibility that college students the last 3 years and moving forward have been afforded? Does that translate into expectations from workplace? Really interesting question. I don't have any way to.
I don't. Well, it's kind of funny because you just said that it's still just such early days. Even you were saying, Vicki, that we're not even at that new normal yet because the ground isn't even starting to settle yet. It's still very tumultuous, and I find it a really refreshing perspective from individuals such as yourself, because my guess is that when we look out with a lot of these vendors, they're like, no, we already know what we're doing. We're going this direction, and you're like, actually, no. So.
Yeah. So one of the things that you have to remember is how quickly student culture changes. So the students are at the institution usually 4 years, maybe 5, right? And within that time period, a lot can change.
Mm-hmm.
I have an example from Northwestern where the student government decided that students shouldn't advertise their events by passing out paper flyers. They should only do it online as a method for sustainability.
Sure, yeah. Okay.
And by God, within a couple of years, there are no more people
No more
passing out
flyers?
flyers, and everything is online.
I feel like that's a part of my history that it's like
It's
been
gone.
torn.
It's
More with
Yeah.
the paper mache.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh,
Right,
wow.
exactly. But it's, for me, it's like this really good reminder that within 4 years they change the student culture, and we've got a group of students who, right now, the ones who are coming in had a year and a half to 2 years of disruption during their high school years, and we haven't settled down in their college years. And so, what's going to be that 4-year path for them, and then how are they changing the institution for the people who are coming after them? One thing that we saw last year was that students were really struggling, and some of the faculty felt like it wasn't the first year students, it was the second year students who were having that much more trouble. And their theory was, well, they had not been well acculturated to the institution, because when they started, they didn't have the upperclassmen there to show them this is how our
100%.
institution
Yeah,
works.
100%.
Yeah. So I started in the current role 14 months ago, and even during the pandemic, I oversaw undergraduate education at the IUPUI campus, and we were talking in early 21 just about the notion that the first-year students that had just gone through, they're going to be first-year students again, because they were very rarely on the campus. So I think Vicky's point's a really good one, and even within the students we have in the traditional age schema, forget about everyone else that is in higher ed. I mean, there's a lot of difference there for sure.
Oh boy, I don't know what they're gearing up for here, but it sounds big. So tell me about this moment that you wish that you had kind of had a little more space in your panel to talk about this morning, which is if you did want to flex and say, look, we've got a great moment here, what would be the things that you would put out there? Or, let me give you that moment to say, how do you use some of the cachet you have right now and the goodwill that's being given to your department?
I think it's a give and take situation. I think that making things easier for faculty is one thing, so that's going to be investing in tools and services, which will be expanding our areas, which we don't mind. I think that it's going to I think it's incumbent upon us to make digital accessibility absolutely fundamental to everything we do. And again, we're going to have to figure out a way to do that without increasing the burdens on our faculty too much. And so it's not just sort of like a good thing, I think it's absolutely what we have to do. And then I think the third thing is that this is the moment if we want to say, look, we see the student body is changing, we see that the faculty need help, let's put all of our efforts into student success, making sure that students feel like they belong, they're included, and that they understand the tools that they have at the institution to further their education. And I mean, I think part of the reason we talk about faculty is because we don't actually really have support units for students. We have a help desk. But
interesting. What's the like? So
but we don't.
What does that look like? What's the difference? I guess
we do tons of outreach to faculty. We have symposium. We have talks. We have communities of practice. We don't do that with our students. We assume that they know what they're doing technologically.
Yeah, I completely agree. Another idea or space I would think about as we look forward is video. If we think about how we all consume information these days, videos increasingly will continue to be an increasing part of what we do. Of course, with students, the social media platform changes like every 2 years, the preferred one. But that's kind of how they want content.
Sure.
And so high level, professional, and then I'm going to add engaging video content, which could mean overlaying a couple of different tools. I think that's a space that we're going to be trying to figure out how to invest more in as we move forward. Because that can serve on-premise, can serve remote, can serve hybrid, and can be reused ultimately.
So is there any one, I'm trying to think of the feedback that you got during your presentation. Is there anything that stood out, or is there any other, unexpected question that you got, or maybe an experience or a challenge that someone said that you weren't you weren't expecting, or was it mostly people in the room were like, "Yep, we agree"? And
There was one comment. There was one comment that I really remember was a faculty member from one of the Minnesota state schools said, "We have some faculty who are saying, what, do we have to spoon feed the students? You know, they've sort of lost some of the sympathy and empathy that they might have for the students. Not all the faculty, but some of them. And I think that's a possibility at any campus. And so it might be part of our jobs to help smooth that over a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last few years have been hard on all of us, and I think there was a lot of talk about supporting students rightfully so during the pandemic. I think at least I've heard some faculty say a little bit about supporting faculty and staff and not as well. And I think what it speaks to is they're being asked to do more, and at the same time they have the same outside of work pressures that students do. And so I just think there's a real we're on the back end of whatever this thing is, and I think we've all changed, and we all have different preferences and needs, and I think that's part of what we're still thinking about.
fantastic. Well, I'll tell you what, Victoria and Jen, thank you so much. I know we're on the sort of tail end of the conference here, so I really appreciate you coming over and taking time to speak with me about this. It's a really interesting conversation. And I'm really interested to find out what you guys do next in terms of flexing this muscle and whatnot. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Yes, thank you for asking us.
Chris, can you hear us?
Chris will tell me.
Audio's on. We're all good
Audio's
to go.
okay.
Great, you can take down the splash screen. Great, because Noah is here. And is it Geisel?
That's awesome. That never happens. Yes.
Wow. I got a lucky strike. Maybe, whatever. So we're still here at Educause. This is I saved the best for last. I gotta say, right?
I'm going to try and deliver though. Let's see. Hopefully people are nice.
You're the University of Colorado Boulder. You've
Yes,
been
sir.
here forever. I see micro credentials program manager.
Yeah. I've not been here forever. Yesterday was my 2-year anniversary.
Two-year anniversary. Yeah. Fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah.
How do you liking Colorado? Where did you come from?
I'm actually a Colorado native. I'm the rare.
Oh, see, you have been for forever.
And I'd see you 2 years. I moved, but I didn't know that I was going to be back in Colorado when I left. I moved to the Dominican Republic. I thought I'd be, I don't know, somewhere in Asia or something. Then I just had an amazing opportunity to come to Colorado and work on a movie with John Sayles, and I just never left.
That's fantastic. Well, a fellow Colorado native myself.
Hey-o.
So fantastic. But what I was going to say was that, when I first approached you about being on the podcast, I was going to talk about micro-credentials, but you're like, you know what? There's other cool things that we can talk about, like where IT sits in the RFP process, what are we doing about gamification and learning and these kinds of things. So let's talk about those things instead.
Yeah, not to for anybody who's watching this live or sees the recording, it wasn't about hijacking it. I just figured there's so many conversations that are kind of redundant at this point. And specific to this audience that you shared was a lot of IT professionals thought, let's share some things that they might not be heard about. And so
let's do it. So talk to me about the RFP process. It's something that we are a little bit passionate about in our company just because we bid on a lot of RFPs, right?
Yeah.
And so I actually kind of like a little light bulb went on. I'm like, wow, I'd love to hear from the other side of the table. Like, what are the challenges? Where do things kind of fall apart? What goes right? What have you seen and how would you do it better?
I mean, I'm sure there's lots of things to do better. I think that there's just so many opportunities, I think, for people to, at the very beginning, to start out just by figuring out what are our functional requirements. I think that's a superpower that our IT colleagues have. And oftentimes they're brought into the party way too late for that. And so, as somebody who's been consulting in the micro-credentials and digital badging space for a lot of the last decade, I get so many phone calls, emails saying, what platform should we get? And I just know that your audience would hear that and just grit their teeth and say, that's like page 17 of volume 2 of questions that we should be asking. We should be asking, what do we want to do? What integrations are necessary? What accessibility needs do we have? What security needs do we have? What data do we want to be able to collect? Is it important that there's single sign-on? Is it important that it's talking to... And so I just think that by bringing in our IT professionals, and so I would encourage folks in the IT side of the house, if you put out feelers, find out if these are conversations are happening on their campus, because they probably are or soon will be. And so put the message out when that's happening, or if it's already happening, invite us to the table, because it's so often, I had a CIO tell me, we're really good at digging holes, and we will dig this hole where you tell us to, but if, it's so often that we end up having to be told, fill that hole in. We actually needed it 5 feet over there. And that doesn't win hearts and minds in IT. Their resources are limited. It's just, it's not a good process. And it's just by just inviting those colleagues to the table early, they could say, actually, that's not where you need the hole. You need it over here. Let us help you. And so, and unfortunately, I think that does require advocacy, from OIT to put the word out. Use us. We're experts.
Why do you think that advocacy doesn't happen? Is it the nature of the beast? There's a lot of people in IT who are like, look, I have my expertise. I'm over here. And are there translators that should be in the middle? Or is that just essentially like a human resource issue on any campus where can you hire that translator? Or, I guess
that's such a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I think that. Why is that advocacy necessary? Just because people outside of IT are in IT, and so it just doesn't occur to them. We need IT
because IT is magic. Yes.
And so that I think that's it's not because of an intentional exclusion, is my guess. It's people not thinking, let's bring in these superheroes, right? And so it shouldn't be necessary for them to advocate. I just think that if they do, hopefully there's an enthusiastic audience that, yeah. We need to bring you in. And I think that another reason to bring them in is not just that expertise, but because IT is also helping student success. Center for Teaching and Learning, housing, IT touches every other unit on campus. And so maybe they're also able to recognize other synchronicities or redundancies that can help make the process better, because they just have their fingerprints on so many things. It's just such a miss for me in my mind to not have them there.
Fantastic. So take me to what would that look like if I were to sit up and have IT at the table? What would be like the 3 questions that you like? The one thing that you didn't say as you were kind of go through them was, do we already have this? I think that happens a lot, and you tell me if I'm wrong, where there's already a tool or a function that is what you need, and so you're actually like duplicating those kinds of things. Like, is there a top 10 list of questions that you'd put on the table in terms of what they would offer in part of this process?
And I will answer your question, and I just want to fully disclose I'm not an OIT
Sure.
so I'm probably the worst person
As
to
you do that, before you do that, I'm going to pause because I think my computer's going to shut off, and I'm going to solve that problem here, which is going to require one thing real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone was not smart enough to engineer this particular thing. Let's see if this works. We'll find out.
Magic.
Did these just shut off now? Let's find out. Hey, Chris, can you still hear us? Interesting.
All is okay.
All is okay. Well, you know what? We're not even going to.
We have just battery. It's charged.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, my computer was about to die. Sorry, folks, but here we are. So my question was, I know you're not. So I'm not.
Yeah. I am a total poser in answering this question. And since you asked it, I would say that that redundancy question is a great one, and they might be uniquely qualified to know the answer. I ran into a colleague from a school you've heard of this morning. She heard it from me. Hey, did you know that you all have contracts with multiple digital badge vendors? And I only know because I saw somebody who I knew on LinkedIn shared a badge they'd earned. It was issued by a vendor that's different from the one that I've seen her present about working with. So, yeah, I think the redundancy thing is a huge one. I think that asking, how are you going to support the training? So many people, jump into the purchasing without necessarily considering who's going to know how to do this? How are we going to build up capacity and then train the trainer on this? And so then all of a sudden, there's this, burden placed on OIT that they didn't offer or ask for.
Mm-hmm.
They may be totally thrilled to offer that, but they'd probably love to be asked first. And maybe by proactively, making that a part of the process, they help you realize we need to account for that internally as a resource. We need to build that into part of our cost of doing this.
Absolutely.
So those come to mind as 2 kind of high level questions.
Where does the total cost of ownership conversation come in? Is that a sort of a thing? Because you just put on training. Ultimately, any system you buy, you've got to maintain it. It's going to be upgraded over time. Like, what are the resources that you're going to put into it? Is that something that it almost sounds to me like an obvious one that's missed along the way for people who aren't in the IT universe?
Totally. Yeah, or don't have a great project manager to help them out, right? Left to my own devices, I would have missed out asking our users, hey, how are you planning on enrolling or, helping have learners declare for this? And then keeping track of them and progress monitoring, making sure they don't fall through cracks, especially if it's a non-academic unit that doesn't have an LMS, right? A lot of times they're only thinking about the cost of course design and instruction. And so IT, just because they see this over and over, are going to think of what was the word used? Total cost of ownership?
Yeah, total cost of ownership, yeah.
Love that phrase. Yeah, I feel like that's an OIT where their phrase probably that they
I'm sure, believe
I
me,
can't believe this moron just learned that word. He was today years old. And
I'm sorry, that was awesome.
I probably know some things they don't know, but
Sure.
that we balance. We're the yin to each other's yang, hopefully.
So take me to like my credentials program manager. Talk to me about the learning space that you occupy. Another part of the conversation that you said, look, there's probably a lot of interesting conversations around where we're using gamification, where we're using non-traditional learning, where we're leveraging, Google searches rather than whatnot. Like, what are some of those things that are thoughts on your mind?
Yeah, I think to the gamification question in particular, and so this is maybe shifting from our IT audience more to like our LDX audience.
Wait, tell us what LDX is.
Sorry, learning design and experience.
Okay.
And so I hope that you know what? I am today years old when I realized I assumed I knew what it meant. I might be totally wrong, and somebody
I
in the
think you're
chat
totally
is
right, though.
going
It's great. Hashtag LDX. We've got it.
Yeah. I've taught middle school before, so I have no dignity left to lose if I'm wrong about this. It is. I'm okay if people call me out. At Seniorgy on the Twitter if you need to subtweet me and just blast me. But I think a lot of people's background knowledge, where they come to this, they've heard this through gaming, and so they see badges and gaming makes total sense. They right away get it.
Yeah.
And there's a spot for that. That is recognition. I think that when we start to think about micro credentials and the role for badges and micro credentials, something that's unique that's not in the other space is credentials. Right. So it's not just recognition, it's also something credentially.
Something that makes a difference in other parts of their life. It's actually valuable.
There's somebody other than just them and their teacher and their mom who cares. Right. There's an admissions counselor or a hiring manager who says, oh, they've been credentialed in something that I care about. Right. There's this, meaningfulness that's worthy of the school's brand. And so, I think anytime you put a finish line in front of people, there's going to inherently be gamification happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with a short program, you are doing that. And so the gamification is inherent. Just whether it's not overt is the question. If it is overt, that's totally okay. I think I would invite people to think about it intentionally. Because there's, I think, multiple risk factors. The biggest one is trivialization. I think that if something just feels playful.
It's not important.
Joy
valuable,
and playful is important in learning, and it helps engagement. It's great. And if a hiring manager perceives this as being whimsical and not credentialed, that's all of a sudden probably a risk factor to your entire ecosystem of micro credentials, right? That it can erode the trust, I think. And so I would encourage people to be careful and intentional in how they go about doing that.
Awesome. What are some of the ways that the University of Colorado is putting micro-credentials on the table that you think maybe other universities aren't considering, or has been especially effective? Or
I think it's so early to it might be wagging the dog to talk about efficacy. There is certain things that we're excited about. We've made to where any unit on campus can propose. So it can be an academic unit or a non-academic unit. It can be for credit, non-credit. And clearly a non-academic unit cannot offer something for credit unless they're partnering with an academic unit. But as a result, we have things like a workforce workplace skills for student employees micro-credential.
Okay.
Somebody came to our office and said, look, we have these students who are spending more time in our call center working for us in a semester than they spend in any given class. And the only narrative they have to tell the story of their learning achievement for that is their paycheck.
Interesting. Yeah.
But they are acquiring and demonstrating skills.
100%. Yeah.
And there's nothing in the transcript of that. There's nothing in the narrative of who they are as a learner achiever that says, that is issued by CU Boulder that says that. And so, that we identified 3, top level skills of onboarding, training, communication, leadership, specific to that domain of student workers. And, as a way of signaling these students have demonstrated this, and they might be, top of the line for interviews after that for other jobs on campus, and, for the first job when they leave campus.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
So just anecdotally, I think an amazing success out of the gate is, just from before we'd even issued any, just the students who were already in that office who had been told you will have an opportunity to earn this, had told their friends. When this fall, when we opened up jobs, somebody came to interview and they said, this is my top choice because I hear that I can get this micro credential for this. And so all of a sudden, this recruitment tool for students, you have a competitive advantage over every other unit until every other unit on campus starts adopting this.
Yeah.
And so that's a neat one. I think that there's stuff focused on faculty and teaching partners and teaching international students.
Mm-hmm.
There's a micro credential just dedicated to understanding the international student experience and how you can be really valuable instructor in shaping their successful outcomes in your course. There's another one in just and equitable teaching practices. And, my kind of dream for where that goes is, we are very specific. There's criteria. You can't just show up to these,
of course,
put in seat time, and then you're earning a credential. There's measurable criteria that you have to demonstrate, and it's assessed in order to earn this. And, I think that we're going to start to see that the faculty who have these are going to have great outcomes for students, and they're going to be displaying their badges. And I think in a, mid to near term future, we might see learners who are previewing classes by looking at the professor and actually looking at their bios and seeing, oh, they have this badge. I had a class with somebody else who got credentialed in just equitable teaching. I'm going to take it from them, not this person who doesn't have that, right? Like, and my analogy for that is minimum wage. It didn't come about because of legislation. It came about because they sent out stickers to any employer that was offering a federal.
Really, I didn't know that.
And so consumers could say, I can buy my bread at this store that is paying a minimum wage, or this one doesn't have that.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want to put my money to support that practice, right? And so I think that we're going to start to see examples of that, social signaling through credentialing. So those are just two examples of things that I'm really excited about, and that there's lots that I'm really excited about, but I think those are two examples of things that I'd love to see happening at other campuses, but I think we're kind of on the bleeding edge. I guess another thing is in the metadata, so if you use digital badges to, communicate the learning achievement that happened during micro-credential program. Like for us, we do differentiate. There are universities and colleges and employers that use those words interchangeably. The analogy that we use is that as a diploma is to a degree, a digital badge is to a micro-credential.
Okay.
So digital badge is this vehicle that, communicates somebody, completed
that particular thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And, we really put on the table for the metadata that this is not just a, sexy new digital version of what we used to go to the bookstore, buy fancy paper and print out as a certificate. That we're taking advantage of the alignment feature to be able to actually say to, somebody who's offering this, well, what are your membership organizations? You're members of the National Association, fill in the blank. Or when they graduate, what are your learners degree members of? And do they have competency or standards frameworks?
Right. Mm-hmm.
They do, really. So, is the learning that's happening here aligned, or that learning outcomes aligned with those standards? Because if so, we can actually, in a machine-readable way, point to those.
Right.
And say, anybody who's earned this credential, we're going to assert that there's a line between this credential and those standards. And I think in a not-too-distant future, employers are going to be doing reverse lookups on Indeed, on LinkedIn. They're going to say, we're looking in this position for people who have these skills that align with this standards framework, because we're members of this association.
Right.
And they're going to be able to pay Indeed money to send emails to learners who have credentials that have that alignment. And so I think you're giving your learners a competitive advantage when you take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that we're doing that I'm not seeing as many people do as I'd love it is actually attaching evidence. You have the ability
in the metadata, you're saying, or
in the metadata
okay. Mm-hmm.
for for my badge could be totally identical to everybody else who's gotten the badge, except that my badge has my evidence that shows how I met that criteria.
Give me an example. What does that mean? Like, what would evidence be?
I mean, so let's just something that's totally accessible. Like, what if Red Cross, start doing digital badges for getting your CPR first aid?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Part of that course, anywhere in the country, is you have to do 60 seconds of sustained chest compressions. What if there's a video of me doing 60 seconds of sustained chest compressions?
And so you can put that in there and say, hey, look, here's the video.
Anything that's digital, we just like with an email, a video, a Word doc, a PowerPoint, a testimonial from the instructor, audio, anything that's digital, we can include as a way of saying, you have to take our word for it. Like maybe
look at it, yeah.
They didn't bring in Kleenex for extra credit to get to that. This was what they had to meet. There was no B minuses. They either met the criteria or they have not yet met the criteria. And if you don't want to take our word for it, click on the evidence. I mean, we had this coding in R micro-credential. And if you earn that, your evidence links to your GitHub where your project that you built using R is there. And I think that's really cool.
It is really cool. Super cool.
Yeah.
So what are as soon as the woman in the sky goes away here, I think we had to shut down here.
Metaverse can still be part of this. They're not mutually exclusive.
That's Chris. Chris likes to put his opinion. So final question to you then. Maybe not the final, but so it's easy to talk about all the cool stuff and the vision for the future and what are the two top challenges that you are facing in your job or you're facing in your institution or working with others around either micro-credentialing or
And globally, I would say the two biggest challenges: senior level leaders buying in. That's the number one. There's so many projects I've had to work on where it was just pushing internally, just nonstop internal marketing. You should do this because it's good for kids, but you have senior leaders who are bought in, even if they don't understand it at a deep level. If they're bought into the notion of it, they're talking at it. They're in a conversation. They hear somebody say something. They say, "I wonder if that's a micro. You should go talk to the." Well, somebody with a fancy dovetail saying that's might be perceived as more than a suggestion.
Oh, yeah,
so
sure.
They're coming. So I have the blessing of amazing senior level buy-in. So I'm not time for practical marketing because so many internal stakeholders are
Calling you,
yeah. And so senior leader buy-in is huge. And the other one is just like a lack of recognition that for all the shininess, it's anything new. It's just change management.
Right.
And so, are we just remembering the stuff we talked about in grad school or whatever on all these projects of just basic change management? Are we mapping out? Are we mapping out who are our stakeholders? Are we engaging our stakeholders? Are we, empathizing? Are we iterating? Are we just basic change, man? Are we doing a good job communicating? Do we have does comms know about this?
Right. Yeah. Sure. 100%.
Who just applies to any project, right? So change management, just basics, I think, are things that over and over I see people do. It's just it's just such a predictable way to make decisions that don't stay made, right?
Fantastic. No, I will tell you what, I couldn't have asked for a better guest to close out our live podcasting here at Educause. This has been a fantastic conversation. Your energy is infectious.
Thanks.
I love what you're saying, and I love your vision. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Can I do one shameless plug before we cut that? Did they already cut it?
No. Please.
TheBadgeSummit.com. We just actually got our date secured to save the date, July 24 to 26. Dr. Michael Torrance from Motlow State in Tennessee is going to be keynoting. He's just the most amazing human, and it is a conference just dedicated to digital badges and micro credentials. So if you're exploring the space, all day, every day of this conference is just nerds like me geeking out on how we're going to change the world in equitable and accessible ways through micro credentials.
And it's thebadgeconference.com?
TheBadgeSummit.com. Thank you for TheBadgeSummit.com, at TheBadgeSummit or at BadgeSummit on Twitter. It's on LinkedIn. Find us. We're a small but nimble team, which is me making an excuse for the web page isn't updated yet with our save the date. So sorry if you're going to see 22 information, but 2023 info's coming soon with a save the date and call for proposals. Would like even if you're just getting started and your session is asking questions, not giving sexy answers, please propose. We'd love to see you there. Thank you.
There you go. There it is.
Thank you for letting me do that.
No worries, man. Thank you so much.
I hope this was helpful for folks.
Absolutely.